How's it, guys? This is Dayvy FC and welcome back to the Euro 2020 fantasy video. Now in this video I'll be taking a look at the Limitless Chip and the draft that I would use if I was to use the Limitless Chip in Game Week 2. I will be discussing if I'm going to be using the Limitless Chip or the wildcard in Game Week 2 in tomorrow's video, which is going to be the team selection for Game Week 2 of the Euro 2020 fantasy competition. So stay tuned to that video if you guys want to kind of decide between using which chip, or maybe you don't want to use a chip at all. That's also a very viable strategy, so just stay tuned for that. But in this video I'll be discussing more of the Limitless Chip and what it actually is, what fixtures you guys should be targeting in Game Week 2, before finally moving on to the all-important draft, which I'm sure you guys are all excited for. Finally, to wrap up the video, I'll be discussing what captains I would be looking at for each specific match day of Game Week 2 and why I think they're going to be good captaincy options for your own Euro 2020 fantasy squad. So without further ado, let's get straight into the action. So the Limitless Chip, what is it? So if you guys have played FPL, basically what it is in the Euro 2020 game is the Limitless Chip is a free hit chip with an unlimited budget. So yes, it's a really exciting chip to finally have. It's a really cool concept in my opinion to have kind of an unrestricted budget, an infinite amount of money so that you can kind of theoretically select the best players possible for your starting 11. But with the Limitless, it's only going to be valid for one single game week. So just please remember that if you're going to be using it in Game Week 2, in Game Week 3, the last matches of those group stages, your team is going to look exactly the same as what you ended Game Week 1 with. So just keep that in mind, and that's going to kind of lead to the decision that you guys have to make whether you use the Limitless Chip this week or next week in terms of Game Week 2 or Game Week 3. But as I mentioned, we'll be discussing that in the team selection coming up tomorrow. So the Limitless Chip, obviously there's going to be an unlimited amount of variation because you can basically afford any single player. So you can think of budget as being a constraint. When you take that constraint away, you get unlimited solutions to your kind of problem. Obviously your options are going to be endless, and you guys might have a different selection to me, and I might have a different selection to what you were actually thinking. So that's perfectly fine. What I would kind of do is just listen to the advice in this video, go down to the comments down below after you've watched the video and argue with me why you think you should be going for a Scottish player instead of tripling up for maybe England, for an example. But now let's go on and look at the fixtures. So now going on to the fixtures, which are going to be the bread and butter of any single draft. And why I say that is that you got to look at the fixtures first and kind of select which teams you think can do well overall, and then go to that specific squad and then select the best options out of that respective team. So in Game Week 2, there's only going to be 4 match days, different to how Game Week 1 was. We actually had 5 match days if I do recall. So only the 4 match days. I think the new deadline for Game Week 3 is on Sunday. So please keep that in mind when you guys are planning your weekend ahead, so that you manage to put some time in to organize your Game Week 3 team. But the Game Week deadline for Game Week 2 is going to be on Wednesday afternoon. So please keep that in mind if you guys are working or have school. Just remember that you're going to have your team finalized for that 3 p.m. South African time. So if you are in the UK, it should be about 2 p.m. if I do remember correctly. So starting off on the first match day of Game Week 2, the team that I'm going to be highlighting are going to be Italy versus Switzerland. Now you're probably going to be in the comments down below asking me why I didn't select Russia versus Finland. In my personal opinion, I think that game could be quite a close one. We saw Finland, how they played against Denmark. They were quite resilient, to be honest, and I think that Russia overall weren't that great against Belgium. I know it is Belgium, so I'm not trying to rate them too much on that Belgium fixture, but I just think the standout fixture in my opinion is Italy versus Switzerland. The main reason for that is that Italy looked simply sensational in their match day against Turkey on the first game of Euro 2020, and the thing about Switzerland against Wales is that defensively they didn't look that great either. So that's why I think Italy should be nailed for defensive assets and also attacking assets, and that's why I've gone for Italy as my first kind of matchup or fixture that I am targeting. And then going on to the next match day 2, I've gone for Ukraine versus North Macedonia, and then Belgium versus Denmark. So obviously with Ukraine versus Macedonia, great fixture there on paper. Ukraine, we saw them yesterday against the Netherlands, how they actually aren't that shabby of a side going forward, and defensively maybe not, but I think you definitely should be targeting that attack. And the thing I like about about Ukraine is we'll be coming up on an out of position player in a little bit when we talk about the final draft that I go for. Nothing against North Macedonia, unfortunately. I just think it's going to be that side that everyone kind of targets from match day to match day in these group stages. So that's why I think Ukraine should be where you guys are looking if you are looking at a wild card or a limitless draft. Then Belgium versus Denmark. I just think that Belgium, such a quality side going forward. I just think they're going to be too strong for that Denmark side, and we've already seen the power of Lukaku up front going for that golden boot, so I definitely would be targeting him as a potential captaincy option. Although he is quite highly owned, maybe if you want to go more differential, I just kind of look if Kevin De Bruyne is going to be back from that injury, or you could look at another option, maybe if Eden Hazard's back, a Carrasco, that sort of thing. And also defensively, they've got some nice options going forward from a defensive and an attacking position. Then the next match day 3 of game week 2, I've gone for Sweden versus Slovakia, and then also England versus Scotland. Now this Sweden game, I'm really looking forward to tonight's fixture of Sweden versus Spain, because that's going to give us a good indication of how this Sweden team is going to be playing in Euro 2020, and also to see how maybe Slovakia sets up, because I think they're one of those sides where I don't really know that much about them, if they're defensive, if they're attacking side, how good they are. So that's going to be quite a nicer fixture to kind of see in game week 1 to kind of assess the situation and what we're dealing with both the Sweden and the Slovakian sides. Going on to England versus Scotland. Now the England game did conclude yesterday, as well as the Scotland game, which concluded about 30 minutes ago to an hour ago, and unfortunately Scotland did lose to Czech Republic at 2-0. I don't really think that scoreline kind of told the story of the fixture. I kind of saw updates on Twitter. Unfortunately, I didn't watch the fixture, and I also saw the XG there. So actually the XG was in favor of Scotland, but you would have seen that the second Czech Republic goal was a very good goal, kind of an outside the box shot that caught the keeper off guard. So the XG on that would have been low anyways. But I think Scotland actually played quite well, but I think England will be too strong in this kind of derby, a UK fixture. So I am favoring my England assets. And then finally on the last match day of the game week 2, it's going to be the standout fixture in my opinion. It's going to be France versus Hungary. So triple up on France would be almost essential on a limitless, and I would try to fit in as many France players as you can with your free transfers and your wild card, because I think this game is going to be quite a good one from the French point of view. Unfortunately with Hungary, like North Macedonia, just going to be kind of one of those teams that we do target. Nothing against the Hungarians, it's just unfortunately versus these other respective nations, they're going to come out as second best all the time basically. But now let's go on and look at my actual draft. So this is the team selection for the limitless draft that I did manage to come up with, as I kind of reiterated when I went through the limitless and what the kind of chip was. There's kind of an infinite amount of solutions, so you guys can pick and choose as you please, and also make sure to drop your teams down below. If you're going to be using the limitless, or maybe you just want to make a draft, drop it in the comments down below so we can kind of see your squad and what you would be going with. One thing I also want to mention is that this doesn't take into account the kind of playing times. I just kind of selected 5 defenders, put 2 on the bench, but you can kind of chop and change as you do please. As you know, with Euro 2020 you can make subs continuously throughout the match days, so just kind of make sure that your players that play on the first match day of the game week are on your starting 11. So a player like a Gareth Bale, he should be in your starting 11, but I just want to kind of look, if I was to use the limitless chip, what my starting 11 would be, with who I would predict would score the most points out of this kind of a starting 15 that I've made. So starting off in goal, I've gone for Bushchan from Ukraine. So the Ukraine goalkeeper there, just because of that North Macedonian fixture, I think they should be a shoe-in for a clean sheet in my opinion. And then kind of doubling up on that, we've gone for Zinchenko. So if you guys are watching the Premier League, have watched the Premier League, Zinchenko will be kind of a household name there from Man City. And the nice thing about him is that he is playing out of position. So if I do remember correctly, in the Ukraine game yesterday against the Netherlands, he was playing in the midfield position, and as you can see on the Euro 2020 fantasy game, he is listed as a defender. So yes, a little bit of an out of position player there that we'll be getting, and I think against North Macedonia, that's kind of a no-brainer to go for. The next kind of defenders are going to be Spinazzola from Italy, and nothing to say about Spinazzola, just a great kind of fullback. We saw how attacking he was against Turkey. Now against Switzerland, I don't think he'll be as attacking, but I still think there's a good chance of a clean sheet and a potential assist or goal for him, so that's why he's fitted in my lineup. And then I've also gone for Meunier from Belgium. So unfortunately with Castagne, he did have a broken eye socket if I do recall, so he's going to be out for the Euros, and I think he will be back for next season of the Premier League. So I think that Meunier's position is basically guaranteed, and we saw he came on for the injured Castagne and he managed to score a goal. So with that kind of Belgium side against a Danish side that I'm sure will be kind of shaken up, I do think that Belgium could get a clean sheet and even an attacking return from this very attacking fullback that Belgium do possess. Going to the midfield, I've gone for a double up in the England midfielders. I've gone for Sterling, and I've also gone for Foden. What you're probably asking me right now is why have I not gone for Harry Kane? And just something that I kind of picked up in that game against Croatia is that Harry Kane was basically invisible. I know he had that big miss at the far post that he could have definitely scored from, but I just think overall England were kind of playing in behind the defenders instead of playing it to Harry Kane in the air and that sort of thing. So I think Sterling, Foden, if I had to kind of predict which players would start in that England lineup, which is another kind of point of why you shouldn't pick England players, because you don't even know who's going to start in that lineup. I mean, it could be Sancho, it could be Grealish, it could be Rashford, it could be any of those kind of players. So I think that Sterling and Foden aren't nailed, but we usually do get some insight into that England lineup before the deadline, especially because like Sky Sport News, they kind of come out and say which players are expected to start. There are multiple leaks that we do get out of that England camp, so I'm hoping for maybe some indication if we do use the Limitless Chip of which players we can potentially look at to bring into our lineup. But right now I kind of am preferring the double up in the midfield and then bring in Harry Kane, just because the options in that forward department look a lot better than the English striker. Then going on to the rest of the midfield, I've got Insigne and Yarmolenko. So Yarmolenko, if you guys didn't watch the goal he scored against Netherlands last night, do yourself a favor and go watch it. It was an amazing strike there, cutting inside with the left foot. And Insigne also had a great game against Turkey, so he's comfortably in my side, and I really do trust that Italian lineup, so I really am comfortable with playing Insigne even if I was to use the Limitless Chip. Yarmolenko, great fixture as I mentioned with the defenders, and then the next player I do have in that midfield is going to be Gareth Bale. So Gareth Bale against Turkey. Now I know I didn't select Wales versus Turkey as a kind of standout fixture and a fixture that I would target, but the thing about it is that the fixture might not be great, but the player is great, and I think that if Wales are going to score, I definitely will hopefully be through Gareth Bale. So that's why I think if you do have the Limitless Chip, he could be on your bench for the entire game, he could come off, that's enough for Gareth Bale. But the nice thing about him is that he does play the first game week, if I do recall, so you can simply have him on the starting 11. If he doesn't do anything, just ship him out. But if I was to use the Limitless, 9.5 is perfectly fine for your bench, so you can still fit Gareth Bale in here. And against a Turkey side that overall were quite disappointing in my opinion against Italy, I think that Gareth Bale could provide some goals and assists in that one. Going to the front line, which is absolutely stacked. If you're on the Limitless Chip, I would highly recommend to stack your forward line, or at least your attackers, and I've gone for Griezmann and Mbappe, a lovely double up there from that kind of French forward line. With Griezmann and Mbappe, I want to kind of see how they play tomorrow in their matchup against Germany, to kind of see how they are going to set up in the Euro 2020. Usually they've set up with kind of Griezmann at a cam slot with Benzema and Mbappe up front. There's been talks about Benzema being injured, so maybe Giroud will start up front there, but I still think that Griezmann and Mbappe are absolutely nailed. And against a Hungary side in that kind of Group F, group of death, goal difference could be a massive factor. So I think that against Hungary, all three sides, Portugal, Germany and France, are all going to want to absolutely thrash Hungary to get as many goals as possible. So I think Griezmann, Mbappe, that's my kind of double up. To kind of complement them, I've gone for Pavard in that defensive position, because I think he could still offer some great attacking threat. And to be honest, against Hungary, I think a clean sheet for France is basically locked in place. Finally, in that forward line, I've gone for Lukaku. I already mentioned Belgium, how strong they looked, how good Lukaku looked, and with that kind of golden boot in his sights, I think that Lukaku is still a good option, even though they do face a Denmark side that might be a little bit more defensively better than a Russia side on the weekend. And then the final players on the bench there, I've gone for Jordi Alba against Poland. Now they do have to face Lewandowski, which is basically a very tough task for a Spanish defense, but I think if you're going to be going for another expensive defender, you could go for Jordi Alba. From an attacking and a defensive point of view, there is still some potential there for him to get some points. And then also on the bench, we've got Shunin. Apologies if I'm butchering that name, but currently he is the Russia goalkeeper. So they also have a good fixture against Finland. Spoke about that when we were reviewing the fixtures. So I mean, maybe Russia get a clean sheet there, and I mean, Shunin could be quite a good player to have. And also, I think he plays the first match day of the game week, so you can simply just keep him in the lineup and then simply bring Bushchan on if Shunin doesn't get a clean sheet. But this is overall the side. I thought it was quite a nice side with the Limitless Chip. I think it's quite a travesty if your side isn't too attractive, because you got an unlimited budget, so you can simply buy the best players in inverted commas, because the more expensive a player is, usually they return more points. But it's going to be quite interesting to see those of you guys who do use the Limitless Chip versus those of you who don't, and see who actually comes out trumps in terms of the overall points at the conclusion of game week 2. So the final talking point we're going to be going over is captaincy, and I'm going to be using my overall team selection, or the draft that I just showed you guys. So on the 4 match days of game week 2, the first match day I'm going to be going for Insigne versus Switzerland. You could also go for maybe a Russia Russian player against Finland, but I just think I trust Insigne a little bit more. And the nice thing about it is that you can simply just go for Insigne and then just switch him to Lukaku next week if he doesn't end up performing. But I still think there is a good potential there for the Italian midfielder to score a couple goals and assists. We then go on to Lukaku versus Denmark, which is a no-brainer kind of captain, similar to Lukaku versus Russia, just simply the main talisman for that Belgium side. So I do expect him to at least get a goal against Denmark. Then moving on to Sterling versus Scotland. If you do have Harry Kane, he would probably be my standout captain if you do manage to fit him into that forward line. But I still think I trust Sterling if he manages to start. And I think that Scotland game is going to be an absolute goal fest for England and maybe also for Scotland. So you could maybe fit in a Scottish player, but I definitely trust the English side of things on this fixture. So Sterling would be my captain on that game. And then on the final match day, the standout fixture is going to be Griezmann versus Hungary. I've opted for Griezmann over someone like an Mbappe because just maybe if I look at the overall lineup, maybe Griezmann has more of a chance of getting a return versus maybe an Mbappe. But if Hungary are quite an attacking side, then Mbappe will be quite good on that counter attack. But to be honest, Sterling, Lukaku and Insigne are going to have to do a lot to make me not captain a Griezmann or an Mbappe if I was to use the Limitless, just because that fixture is so attractive and definitely the standout fixture of Game Week 2. But this is basically wrap up the video, guys. Hopefully you did enjoy it. Please don't forget to like it if you did, and subscribe if you're new, have not subscribed yet. As I mentioned throughout the video, drop your guys' teams down below if you were to use the Limitless, and tell me if you are using the Limitless and why you're going to be using it in Game Week 2 versus Game Week 3. I'm going to be signing off. It's been Dayvy FPL and I'm out. Cheers, bye.